It is just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Tom Wheelwright, CPA. He is a tax and wealth expert, CEO of WealthAbility, best-selling author of Tax-Free Wealth, Rich Dad Advisor Series, speaker, entrepreneur, and host of two popular podcasts, The WealthAbility Show with Tom Wheelwright, CPA, and The WealthAbility for CPAs Show. He's also Dentaltown's first CPA. Thanks for being our first and only CPA, Tom, and for guiding us on so many strategically brilliant decisions over the decades. Wheelwright has spoken on stage on every continent to over 100,000 entrepreneurs, small business owners, and investors. His goal is to help people achieve their financial dreams faster by permanently and legally reducing their taxes. Wheelwright is a contributor to Entrepreneur Magazine, and his work has been seen in Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, The Washington Post, and on Fox and Friends, Marketplace, NPR, ABC News Radio, and hundreds of media. For more information, visit his website, tomwheelwright.com or wealthability.com/Tom. How are you doing, Tom?
It's great to be here with you, Howard. It is absolutely an honor and a privilege to be with you.
My God, every time I see you out there, I always start yelling in the room, that was my CPA. That was Dentaltown's first CPA. My gosh, I knew you were brilliant the day I met you, but man, you've really gone on to have an amazing career. But you do say you've lectured on every continent, and I want to know, I'm dying to know, what did those penguins think of your lecture in Antarctica?
I'm still trying to get that gig. I can't, whatever it is, they've got their media people just won't let me down there to speak to them. So all the other continents I've been on, but not that one.
I had this crazy idea when back in the day I did 3 Arizona Ironmans in a row, and a lot of my friends were doing those climb the tallest mountain in all 7 continents. And I did Australia, and I did Kili in Africa. But the guys that did the tallest one in Antarctica, you're not going to believe the stories they say. Somebody has to stay awake all night because when you get in your sleeping bag, the natural sweat that comes out of you, your sleeping bag is frozen ice and you could never get out of it and you would die. So someone has to be out of the bag to break up the ice so you can get out of your sleeping bag. And I thought, I'm in Phoenix, I'll pass. Palm trees scare me.
I'm okay with 6 continents. That's fine. I'm good.
You're okay with what?
I'm good with 6 continents. That's plenty.
Yeah. Just do the ocean. That's 70% of the earth. Just give one lecture out there.
I've done that before. I've done multiple cruises. So,
well, the ocean, that's 70% of the earth. So, my gosh, I hate to ask you this question right off the bat, but you and I have been around the block a few times, and we saw the whole market tank and Y2K. Then we saw Lehman's Brothers. I think a lot of people are so wrapped up in this pandemic, they forgot that the year before the pandemic, people like Warren Buffett stopped buying stocks, and everybody was saying the metrics were too high, and everybody was so afraid the market was going to collapse. And then the virus came out, and everybody's all worried about the virus. But I don't know, is it possible that the actual next recession could be as bad as the pandemic?
Oh, I think it could be worse. I don't think there's any question. We built up this bubble and we continue to build up this bubble. And you've got these MMT people who think that deficits don't even matter. And so you can continue to build this bubble. We've got lowest interest rates in history, and they're going to go down to 0. And when you do that, then you just build this bubble. And at some point, you would think it's going to collapse. And when it collapses, it could be huge. I got to be careful with this one.
Well, when the Y2K bubble bobbed, Greenspan, everybody thought he was a god because he lowered interest rates to almost 0, but they never rose them back. I mean, if I put $1 in the bank, it won't even pay me 1% interest on my savings rate because the U.S. government's $20 trillion in debt. They can't afford to pay an interest rate of 5%. So everything is so skewed to where there's no reward for savings. It looks like they're just gambling in the stock market like a casino.
Yeah, well, in fact, if you look at the sovereign funds are all invested in the U.S. stock market. And so that means like the sovereign fund of South Korea and the sovereign fund of Singapore and the sovereign fund of Norway, all these countries with surplus money, they're all invested in the stock market. And then on top of that, you have all the pension plans. So the low interest rates kill the pension plans, right? Because they're basing their whole analysis on like 8% rates, 8% gains. Well, so now the pension plans are going into the stock market. And these are pension plans that are administered by teachers and administrators and government people that absolutely have no idea what they're doing. And, I think that's actually going to be one of our next big crises is the pension plan crisis.
And I don't like to discuss religion, especially with my my oldest sister's a nun. That's always a bad debate. That's why I wanted to see if that's why you lectured in Antarctica. To think you were lecturing to a bunch of my sisters in her convent. They dress like penguins, but I don't like to discuss religion, sex, politics, or violence. But I mean, we've only had two parties for the last 160 years, and neither one of them shows any interest in cutting spending or raising taxes. In fact, I thought the last election, some of those commercials like, oh, well, if you vote for this guy, they're going to raise taxes. Well, dude, raising taxes is paying your bills. So if you don't want to pay your bills, tell me which bill you want me to stop paying and the program they will cut. But now it's not, I mean, I cannot believe I can't even believe this last election. I mean, it's like one robbed the bank and one drove the getaway car, and then one thinks their guy's better than the other, and they're both driving us completely off a financial cliff, which is why I wanted to bring you on the show.
Well, what's fascinating to me, Howard, is that the Democrats have actually included in their platform modern monetary theory, which modern monetary theory, if you read up on it, says that deficits don't matter. Okay, up to a very large point. I mean, they point to Japan and they say, look, Japan's been running 200% of GDP deficits for 20 years, and they're still going, okay, because they get to print their own currency. Okay, so they go to this idea that if you can print your own currency like the US can, and like Japan can, and like China can, you can never run out of money. Okay, the only problem with that is that at some point, when inflation starts getting away from you, will Congress, who's required to raise taxes, because at some point you do have to raise taxes, will Congress have the heart to do it? My guess is not. And at that point, we have runaway inflation. So I think it's just a very dangerous game they're playing.
Yeah, and and the other thing is, I mean, this country is not very old. I mean, it's not even 300 years old. And I mean, how many different currencies have we already had? I mean, it was a tobacco paper. Each state printed their own. I mean, I don't think I mean, none of these currencies last forever, especially when you start counterfeiting them and just start printing them. I remember after the Lehman Brothers deal, it would take a year before the Federal Reserve Chairman admitted that while the Congress was debating that bailout package, he printed $8 trillion on his computer. I mean, he doesn't even have to print the money. You go back a couple hundred years, you needed tobacco leaves. Then you had to print these little paper dollar bills, and it was just a computer entry. So he just did a computer entry in the middle of the night and made $8 trillion out of nowhere. And I go back to Milton Friedman. Something's crazy when the New York Times is running stories that, it took a pandemic to prove that Milton Friedman didn't know what he was talking about. And, he's none of his stuff lasted this long, and he doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, wow. So, the stories get really crazy at the top of a bubble. But when the biggest newspaper in America is saying that Milton Friedman doesn't know what he's talking about, and it's written by some journalist who's probably, not old enough to buy a coffee at Starbucks, it's just insanity.
Yeah, it's a fascinating time. I mean, it's going to be a wild ride. The good news is that while we can't control it, we can certainly control the things we do about it. It's fascinating to me that the Democrats and the Republicans are arguing over whether they should spend 1.8 trillion as a next stimulus package or 3 trillion on the next stimulus package. I mean, we're not talking about, we're talking about a difference of trillions of dollars. They think that and if you talk to a lot of economists think you need to put that much money back into the economy, else this economy will just crash. And, that's what happens in a bubble. You have to keep pumping air into it in order for it to keep from crashing.
Well, what happened to you and WealthAbility? I mean, how does your message hold during these insane times. And by the way, should my homies, should they go to TomWheelwright.com? And by the way, Wheelwright is wheel, like you spell a wheel, W-H-E-E-L, but Wright has a W in front of it. So it's Tom Wheel, like the wheel on your car, and Wright with a W, W-R-I-G-H-T. Was that the right spelling of your name, Thomas? Wright?
That is correct spelling. What I always say is it's wheel like a car and Wright like the brothers.
Oh, there you go. Wheel like the car, right? Like, so should they go to wealthability.com/Tom, or should they go to
wealthability.com is the best place to go. What we've been doing interesting, Howard, I've actually, I've learned a lot from you. You say you learned from me, but I've learned a ton from you. WealthAbility, we now have a network of over 50 CPA firms worldwide. And we're actually training them to help people build wealth, not through the stock market, not through savings, but rather through business, entrepreneurship, real estate, commodities, and things like that, the alternative investments, so to speak, that really have a lot more staying power than the traditional investments like the stock market and savings accounts. And we do it. And what's the great thing about it is, the tax law is really a series of incentives. When you look at the tax law, it's fundamentally a series of incentives. And then you have to look at, okay, so who is it incentives for? Well, it's incentives for business owners first. It's incentives for real estate investors, incentives for people who do energy, people who do research and development, people who do agriculture. So those are where the incentives are. Very few incentives are towards the stock market. Most of them are towards actual entrepreneurship, which is what I love about what you do, Howard, because you're actually working with dentists to be better entrepreneurs. And that's actually the area where there's so much you can do from a tax standpoint. The CARES Act, most people don't realize that big stimulus package had major tax implications, and they were tremendous tax benefits for people. And all we have to do is look at what does the government really want us to do? Where do they want us to put our money? And we do that, we get tax benefits, and at the same time, we make more money. So it's actually, to me, this is a great time because it just means that those who are financially educated are really going to do well, and those who aren't are going to pay the price.
Well, is that covered in your book? You wrote a book, Tax-Free Wealth, How to Build Massive Wealth by Permanently Lowering Your Taxes. You can get on Amazon, and it's got, it's got 254 five-star reviews. 254. That is amazing. To put that in perspective, my book has 54. 5 stars. So I have the same amount of ratings with you if you just get rid of that first. Is there any way I can get rid of that first 2 in front of your deal? Or but tell us about that book. I mean, it says Tax-Free Wealth is about tax planning concepts. It's about how to use your country's tax laws to your benefit. In his book, Tom Wheelwright will tell you how the tax laws work and how they are designed to reduce your taxes, not to increase your taxes. Once you understand this basic principle, you no longer need to be afraid of the tax laws. They are there to help you and your business, not to hinder you. Once you understand the basic principles of tax reduction, you can begin immediately reducing your taxes. Eventually, you may even be able to legally eliminate your income taxes and drastically reduce your other taxes. Once you do that, you can live a tax-free wealth. So so talk about that, because the single biggest thread on Dentaltown, which has, oh my God, hundreds of thousands of posts for the last 20 years, is how come only 3% of the dentists can retire debt-free at 65? So how would you answer that question from your years in dentistry and accounting? Why do you think only 3% of the dentists can retire at 65 debt-free, tax-free? And do you even believe that number?
Yeah, I maybe that's high. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's less than 3%. But here's what happens, Howard. First of all, I think people are fed a lie by Wall Street. That's the fundamental issue, is that we consistently get a lie from Wall Street that the government continues to promote. And the lie is that Wall Street's better at handling your money than you are. So you need to turn it over to them and let them handle your money. And you need to do it through a 401k, an IRA, a pension plan, a profit sharing plan. Because guess what? You're going to be in a lower tax bracket when you retire. Well, based on what you're saying, that's probably true because people are retiring poor. Okay, so the only way you're in a lower tax bracket when you retire is if you retire poor, right? If you retire with the same amount of money you were making while you were working, then you would be in a higher tax bracket, right? Because you don't have all the business deductions and all the other deductions that you have. So the key is if you go back to the subtitle of my book, it's how to permanently reduce your taxes. So here's the key. So Howard, there's one line in the tax law that says all income's taxable. There, unless we say it isn't. There's another line that says nothing's deductible unless we say it is. There's about 30 pages of charts and tables to tell us how much tax to pay. And then the rest of it is a roadmap to reducing your taxes. This is what you do to reduce your taxes. And most of that is permanent tax reduction. The problem is that most advisors, because most advisors are kind of conjoined with Wall Street, they say, well, the way to do it is to defer your taxes to a later year. Well, it's a horrible idea. Think about this. If you put your money into a pension plan or a 401k, you're probably investing that in the stock market. And if you invest in the stock market, you're probably getting income one of two ways, either through dividends or capital gains, both of which are taxed at half the rate of ordinary income if you're outside of a qualified retirement plan, but taxed at the ordinary rates if you're inside a qualified retirement plan. So you're actually increasing your taxes by doing your investing inside an IRA or a 401k or a pension plan. What people don't tell anybody else, what Wall Street doesn't want you to know really, is that most of the tax law is permanent tax savings. There are things like a strategy we have in the book called buy, borrow, die, where you buy real estate. And for example, dentists, here's a perfect example. Dentists ought to be owning their own real estate, in my mind, okay? You own your real estate where your practice is. The real estate, then, it goes up in value. As you've done, Howard, very successfully, you expand your practice to multiple locations, right? And then what you do is you buy the real estate each time. Well, okay, so eventually you're going, okay, I'm going to retire. Well, now you have all this real estate, okay? It's renting. You've gotten big depreciation deductions. Eventually you go, I don't want to own that real estate anymore. So now you sell it, but you do what's called a 1031 exchange, and you buy different real estate. You buy like a Walgreens or a Walmart and get a lease back on that, right? They do a sale lease back. So that's like buying a bond. It's like buying a Walmart bond. Well, that's the safest thing you can possibly buy, right? So you don't pay any tax. Now, when you die, all those capital gains that have been built up in that completely go away. So now what you've done is you've got this tax deduction every year for depreciation. You've got all these tax benefits along the way. You never pay tax. Anytime you wanted money, you just borrowed money against the property. That's not taxable. And then you die, all the taxes go away. So that's just an example. I mean, there's so many ways to never pay tax that why people, I'll give you another example. I had a real estate instructor. He's very well known. And he comes to me as a client. He goes, I'm so proud. One of my goals was to pay $1 million in tax. And I'm going, are you out of your mind? Why would you want to pay $1 million in tax? I said, so listen, here's what we're going to do. And we went through a little strategy. And I said, first of all, you're going to go out and you're going to find your own deal. Instead of doing it for your students, you're going to do one for yourself. We went from a $935,000 tax bill, and I can say this because he said this from stage publicly many times, $935,000 tax bill one year to zero tax bill the next year. And what he did was he found a deal that made him a bunch of money. So he made $300,000 a year in cash flow from this property and paid zero tax. Now, to me, that's a pretty good way to do things, right? Rather than socking things away, socking money on a pension plan or 401k and have that buy, hold, and pray strategy. You buy the stocks, you hold them, and then pray that they go up. But what happens if you want to retire when the market crashes? I mean, think about all the people who wanted to retire in 2008, 9, 10, and they couldn't retire because they were dependent on their stock market fed IRA 401k pension plan. And all of a sudden it had dropped 50%. and now they can retire. So they go back to work. What are they? They're greeters at Walmart. Now they're greeters at Costco. And that's what they're doing for the next 10 years of their life until the stock market goes back up and they can afford to retire. So, the whole thing is a matter of a lack of financial education. And it's because we're so ingrained in this idea that Wall Street does a better job with our money than we do. And that's just baloney. They're not smarter than you are. You're much better at handling your own money. And when you deal with your own money, you get much better tax results as well. And think about it. What if you had that? So let's say you made $500,000 in a year and you paid $150,000 in tax. What if you had that $150,000 back and could invest that? I mean, think about over the years, what kind of an accelerator that is to your wealth. To me, that's why people retire poor, because they're actually taught that you're going to be in a lower tax bracket when you retire, which means you're being taught to retire poor. It's actually ingrained in our culture, Howard.
Well, Tom, we live just a couple miles apart. We're both right here in Phoenix. I'm in Phoenix, you're in Chandler. If you ever get a client who's like an 80-year-old multi-millionaire and she's a widow, will you fix this up? I mean, I'll even drive clear to Scottsdale. I might even drive all the way to Tucson if you could fix me up with that. But is there another thing going? I mean, obviously the pendulum swing and the last time I saw inflation, crippling inflation, was 1980. It went all the way to 21% unemployment and was double digit. Inflation was double digit. I mean, it's just crazy what was going on. And then it's been gone ever since Paul Volcker, the New York Fed, took over and crushed inflation, he said, and it's been gone. Wouldn't there be another reason to be into real estate? Because to be holding your wealth in something other than a piece of paper that can be printed by the U.S. government, a dollar bill, wouldn't it be safer? Isn't that the argument for people who like gold or real estate or just something the government can't print? Wouldn't that be a better bet? 40 years.
There's two really good arguments for real estate as an example, but hard assets in general. Okay, so the first is that it's always there, right? It doesn't go away, right? I mean, it may wear out a little bit, but it doesn't go away. It's always there, and it always has value. Okay, it can go down in value, but the second thing is that it actually produces income via rents, right? So if you have a good property, you're going to rent that. You're going to make repairs, et cetera, but the renters are going to pay for your repairs. The renters are going to pay for the upkeep on top of giving you cash flow. So you're going to have this cash flow for a very long time. But here's the other thing. You can use debt with real estate. And debt is the best inflation hedge in the history of the world. It's the best inflation hedge. It's better than gold. It's better than life insurance. It's better than any other kind of inflation hedge ever invented is debt. Because if you really believe that, we're not going to go lower. We can't go too much lower in our interest rates now. So interest rates inflation can only go up. And so if you think that, okay, we're out of control, we're going to be more out of control in the future, inflation's going to come back, then you'd like to pay that debt back with cheaper dollars in the future. And so real estate's just a great way to do that. If you look at historically, you look at the really wealthy families that have had generational wealth, their money's always gone three places. They store their wealth in real estate, gold and silver, precious metals, and in fine art. And those are the three places they store their wealth, because those are the three things that never, ever, over the long run, lose value. They always have some kind of value to them. And the great thing about real estate, or the great thing about investing in energy and even business, is that it's constantly producing cash flow and can produce cash flow for a very, very, very long period of time. And you're right, you're not dependent on somebody on a piece of paper that somebody can print and just print as much as they want.
Dentists, it seems like, if you say dentist, people always think of two things when they think of dentists. They think of, dentists love golf, and they do love real estate. I mean, there are so many dental real estate podcasts posted on Dentaltown. Dentaltown has 62 podcasts. And by the way, I wish you would load your podcast on Dentaltown. It's free. I mean, and there's 250,000 dentists on that site and those podcasts. I mean, some of those views are crazy. There's a dentist in Florida that put a podcast on that app. He already has 650,000 views. Just blows my mind. But they love real estate. Why do you think dentists have always liked golf and real estate?
Dentists, I've always loved dentists as clients. So dentists are an interesting breed because you have two things that are important when it comes to financial and tax planning. You have time and you have money. Okay. And those are two things. The problem with doctors, they have, multiple issues with doctors. One is they think they know everything. Dentists are actually quite willing to learn. Okay. So I love that about dentists. Doctors don't have any time. Dentists typically, manage their time very, very well. I mean, I always been impressed with the dental industry and how you've managed the insurance companies so much better than any other medical industry. And so you guys have a real opportunity, because you have some time, you can go out and do the real estate. You can actually be investing in real estate. Plus, practices are very real estate centric, right? I mean, it's location, it's having the real estate, and you can always buy your own real estate. So I actually think it's a great place for dentists. You don't have to. You really could do it within your own practices as you build those practices out, like you teach, and just have an amazing amount of real estate, and that's going to be enough wealth to have a great retirement and never pay taxes on it.
So Tom, back to specifics. So the dentists listening to you that are big in real estate and want to listen to that, do you actually do their CPA accounting, or do you refer them to a CPA in your network, or do you should the dentist have his CPA join your network? I mean, how does he learn your philosophy?
That's actually the great thing about our network. So you have a choice now. Okay. It used to be that, I had to, I had to find somebody for you. You had to switch your CPA. Now you could either come to us and we'll find a CPA for you that's the right fit for you, or you can bring your CPA to us and we'll train your CPA. So we're happy either way. We just want, dentists are actually a group that we absolutely love working with. I love working with dentists, always have, and they're just they're really good business people as a general rule, really good clients, and willing to learn new things and willing to take, to actually think about things differently than they have in the past. You guys are always learning. And to me, that's the key, is that you're engaged in the process, because I always say that if you want to change your tax, you have to change your facts. But I can't change your facts for you. You have to do it. So the fact that dentists are willing to learn and actually take action, I think, is a huge benefit. And so we're just happy to help, whether you need a new CPA or whether you really like your CPA and they just need to learn. Either way, come see us and we'll help any way we can.
So if a dentist wanted you to be their CPA, is that the wealthability.com/Tom?
It would just be wealthability.com, right? There's
wealthability.com.
Yep, and you can schedule a call and we'll absolutely get you set up. Absolutely.
Oh, okay. So are you wealthability.com? Is that you?
That is me.
Only you? Because I know you do. I know you do stuff with Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Kiyosaki. Is that related to him?
It's not. It's not. WealthAbility is my company. My partner and I, we've had this company. Actually, my partner, Ann. You worked with her too back in the day, and the two of us have stayed together. We've now been partners 20 years, and she runs she basically runs the back end, and I'm kind of the front man for it. So which is odd because she's the pretty one. I'm not, but it's okay. I mean,
speaking of Ann, what was Ann's last name?
Mathis.
Ann Mathis. Speaking of Ann, I talked to Lori this morning, and the first thing she told me to do is she saw that I was podcasting her, and she's like, "Oh my God, tell Tom I said hi," and all that stuff. And by the way, to be clear with my homies, I these are not commercials. Tom, how much did you pay me to come on the show today?
I paid you nothing.
And did you call me or did I call you?
You know what? I have no idea.
I called you. I'm the one who called you, and because I'm always seeing you out there, and I knew you were. But I can vouch. He's a great guy. He was our Dental Town first CPA back in the year and all that kind of stuff. But so do you think? Okay, so I'm gonna just lay it all out there. Dentists. The thing I love about dentists, they're cynical bastards. I mean, they just are. They're just cynical bastards.
Right.
And they're like, this is Howard and his buddy in Phoenix and all this kind of stuff like that. If this was so obvious, why would more CPAs not be doing it?
Because it's hard work. It's really hard work. Okay. I think I think one of the 4-letter words in my industry is easy. And another one's lazy. And we have and it's really easy to say, max out your 401k. It's really easy to say, do a pension plan. It's very hard. The kind of work we do is really hard. We'll take, Howard, we're going to take 3 to 6 months right off the bat, every other week with a new client. Every single client that comes in, we spend 3 to 6 months with just to establish a plan of action. Before we ever do any, actually implementation, we spend 3 to 6 months, and that's not easy. I mean, we actually have CPAs that come into our network. They take a couple of clients in, and then they bail. They go, "This work's too hard. It's too hard." So it's not. I mean, we work really hard for what we do, and I think that's really it. I do. I think it's just really hard work that we do. You really have to be knowledgeable. You really have to be trained well. You know me, I'm a big educator. I'm a big trainer. That's what I love to do. And I'm a big fan of my industry, but at the same time, my industry tends to be a little staid and set in their ways. And so, what we find is, we actually have a rule that to be a member of our network, you have to be an entrepreneur first and a CPA second. And so we only have entrepreneurs in our network. And so that allows them to relate better to other entrepreneurs. But we're really, we're just there to change. We're just there to change the world, but it's hard work.
I want to say 2 experiences that you remind me of that I've lived through. When I was little, the birth to 10, mom and dad had 7 kids, very, very poor. Dad saved up his money and he got into a Sonic drive-in franchise. And he went from 1 to 9 locations. And I can still remember Roger Carpenter from Coffeyville, Kansas. I was 10 years old, and I thought Sonic was so cool because this guy had 100 and he had an airplane. When we went and visited him, we flew to the other places. And I just thought, wow, this guy used to be a teacher in Coffeyville, Kansas, got into Sonic like my dad did, got 100, and he has an airplane. I mean, I just thought I was blown away. But I can still remember him lecturing my dad, the most important thing is to own the land underneath your restaurant. You want to own that damn land. We're buying prime locations. And then he saw that a lot of franchisees had very different thoughts at. And the other one was Dan Carney in Wichita, Kansas, who was an amazing guy, available to young, dumb kids like me in high school. He wasn't into real estate. He was into the business of Pizza Hut, and he didn't care. But I noticed these DSOs now. There's a bunch of corporate chain dentistries, and I still think the smartest one out there is Rick Kirshner of Comfort Dental, because what he does is he goes and buys he'll never build new. He'll buy an old building, like 2,000 square foot, and maybe it used to be a State Farm agent or an accountant or whatever, but it was on nice 4-lane street. He buys that, renovates it into a dental office, sells the franchise to 1 or 2 dentists. And then when they buy the franchise, and the franchise costs exactly what Rick paid for the land and building and the build out, which is exactly what McDonald's does. McDonald's doesn't have a franchise price because we don't know where you're talking about. You're talking about downtown Manhattan or downtown Coffeyville, Kansas, but they go buy the best real estate. They buy the land, say the land's $500,000, they'll build their box, $400,000, they'll put the guts in another $300,000. And if the total is 1.2, they'll say, hey, Tom Wheelwright, the McDonald's franchise is $1.2 million. So then you pay them. So now they're debt free. And then they take 12% off the top. I think Kirshner takes, I'm not sure. I think it's less than, I think it's like 5%, but 1 or 2% of that just goes to advertising. But the bottom line is McDonald's wakes up every morning and they have like 40,000 paid off properties making a rent payment, which is 12% of sales. You can't do a percent of sales in dentistry because that's fee splitting, which is highly illegal. So Rick wakes up the first day of every month, and several hundred paid off Comfort Dentals send him a rent check. So he has no debt. And you always pay attention because he's one of my friends where if he wants to have lunch with you, he sends his jet to pick me up, and I go to the, and to park your car, they just have a driver come pick you up at your house, take you to his jet. You fly there and have lunch with Rick, his wife Cindy, and 2 dogs. So usually when people pick you up with a jet for lunch, you should pay attention. But would you say that McDonald's is really more a real estate company than a hamburger, fry, and a Coke company?
No question. Ray Kroc was very clear about that. He wanted the real estate. The franchise was just a way for him to get the real estate and have good tenants in there that paid him the rent for the real estate. So they're absolutely a real estate company. And like you said, there are lots of companies out there that their whole model is to own the real estate. And this is what I'm saying is that even the way the tax law works, so if you own your own real estate and you own the business, you don't have any limitations on the deductions you take for the real estate. If you own the real estate and then rent it to somebody else, you do have limitations. Okay. So why you don't own your own real estate when you're in business is like beside me. I own my building that my CPA firm is in. Okay. I have a little CPA firm. I still have a little CPA firm. So I sold off the big CPA firm. Now I have a little CPA firm.
And that's when we departed. When you were my CPA, my accountant, then you sold that firm, right? And you recommended us to go to the other place. If you're wondering out there, why am I still not using you? Because you sold that and you recommended we go to these new people. But I think that was mainly just to get rid of your dumb, short, fat, bald friend in Ahwatukee. But anyway, continue.
There was that. That wasn't.
So McDonald's is clearly a real estate company disguised by a hamburger fry. Do you think the Hamburglar was the one who disguised this on the getaway?
It could be.
So
Ronald McDonald. It's a tough call.
So here's a question I hate to ask you because timing is everything, and humans have never predicted anything. So, they didn't predict the fall of the Berlin Wall. I didn't read anything ahead of the Arab uprising. The history books, they still can't even figure out why World War I broke out like that in such a way. One 14-year-old kid shoots a king, and the next thing, everybody in Europe is shooting each other. Crazy times. But so someone listening to you right now, they're probably scared because we're in the middle of a pandemic. Maybe we're having a vaccine, whatever. They did a stimulus package in March for $3 trillion. We used to add $1 trillion of debt a year. Now we've already added $3 trillion, and they're talking about $3 trillion more. What would you advise to the typical 50, 60-year-old dentist right now, or even all dentists, even a young kid?
You know what? The same thing that you would tell them about their dentistry business. It's all about cash flow, right? So real estate is about cash flow. Business, your dentistry practice is about cash flow. If you're in energy, it's about cash flow. So the key is to focus on the cash flow. If you have a good piece of real estate, location, right? And you have good cash flow coming in, then you know that even if you drop 20% of your tenants, 20%, then you're still making money. Now, here's the thing about dentists. You guys are in a great profession. Because you're always going to be needed. You're always an essential business, right? I'm in a similar profession, right? We're always in essential business. So, you're not thinking of my dentistry practice is just going to fold overnight because of pandemic. No, you got shut down for a little bit, but then you got opened back up, and people have to have this. Well, if dentistry practices are your tenants, wouldn't that be a great tenant to have no matter what happens? So it's really all about cash flow. And as long as you focus on cash flow and not appreciation and not, any of this other stuff, but you focus on cash flow, you're going to be fine.
I remember in Sam Walton's autobiography, which was called Made in America, an amazing story. And I want to remind you people that when Sam Walton was alive, I mean, it was, I mean, hell, the name of his autobiography is Made in America. He was truly an American right out of Bentonville, Arkansas. My dad took me there when I was 10 years old to go trout fishing just to see the birth of where this man was from. But in his book, him and his wife Helen got massively screwed over by one of their landlords who kind of acted like, yeah, we'll renew your lease when it comes up or whatever, but had no intention of renewing the lease because he saw this hot business and he wanted him to go out of business. And then he opened up a competing business model right across the street. And Sam swore, I'll never, ever rent again. I mean, he, back in the day. But that reminds me, so if you go to Dentaltown and you just put in a search for real estate, there's just a gazillion threads. But some guy posted this morning, is there a limit to percent increase what LL can charge per month every year? I'm paying around $4,500 a month rent with $2,500 CAM charge, where rent increased 3% per year and CAM stay the same. With previous LL, I would pay around $4,000 to $5,000 as year-end recon charges. With the newest Mega LL this year, I had to pay almost $18,000 tax and $9,000 a year in reconciliation charges on top of the $2,000 water sewage charge. With previous LL, tax and water sewage was included in the CAM. Now I get a letter from LL stating that they are increasing the CAM by another $250 a month and will add $1,450 extra per month as property tax. I'm sure they will, blah, 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 blah. But, I mean, isn't the best answer to what he's saying is, gosh darn. I mean, how would you even answer that? Where would you even start?
So first thing is own your own real estate, and then you're the landlord. So you don't have to worry about that. Okay. But then the second thing is, this is why you have a team. I mean, this is something we teach all the time, is that, business is a team sport. And so you got to have a good real estate attorney who's reading that lease and explaining that to you, and an accountant who can actually run through the numbers. The problem is that attorneys are really good with words, but they can't do math. And accountants are really good at math, but they can't do law. Okay. So you've got to have that team working together. And this is the case right there where that dentist needs to sit down with his accountant and his real estate attorney and say, okay, before we ever enter into this lease, what does this lease say? And what are the restrictions on the landlord in raising rents and CAM charges and so forth? Because you should have a limit, right? You should absolutely have a limit on those CAM charges, that they can only increase a certain percent a year. And just like you have a limit on your rent increase, right? That's limited every year. So why don't you have a limit on that? That's where you bring the team together and you make much better decisions when you make them as a team.
And do you have, I had a friend out here. I couldn't believe it. He rented his dental office and was part of like this 10,000 square foot building, and he only had a couple thousand square foot. And on one side was like a yoga studio and a bunch of people didn't have a lot of money invested so they could just walk, which explains the other phenomena that on student loan debt. Once you owe over $100,000, the default rate's almost zilch. It's all the 20,000 and under who are defaulting. They never had skin in the game to begin with. So anyway, long story short, the roof starts leaking, and it turns out it's a triple net lease, and the tenant's got to pay for it. Well, it was a huge bill. The whole damn roof had to be redone, and the yoga studio and the little coffee shop said, you forget it. And they just walked. They didn't care if they declared bankruptcy or whatever. I mean, you're a yoga. Why do you need money if you just eat kale? And so the bottom line is, he was stuck with the whole damn bill. Or he was stuck with the whole thing. So my question to you is, well, holy moly, I'd be really mad at your real estate attorney who signed that lease for you. What did your attorney say? And guess what he said to me? I didn't have an attorney look at it. I'm a dentist, damn it. I know everything. I know the difference in a cosine and a tangent, algebra, calculus, trig, and I always yell, stay at your lane. I always say that at graduation when you walk up to get your degree from your dental school. The dean should shake your hand and whisper in your ear, you're a doctor of dental surgery. You don't know shit about anything else. Get a team. Stay in your lane. You drill, fill, and bill, but you don't sign a 10-year lease without having somebody that's a doctor of dental leases on your team. So fill out that team. There's a lot of kids listening to this.
Okay,
Podcast listeners are young. What's a team include?
Okay, number one person on your team is your bookkeeper. Okay, number one, I can't tell you how many dentists, pharmacists, doctors, they're going, oh, my wife does my bookkeeping. Bad idea. Never should be a relative. Okay, don't ever use a bookkeeper as a relative, period.
Shout out to Lori Zalowski. She was my first bookkeeper. She sat right next to me.
There you go.
25 years later, president of the company. Best single decision
Absolutely.
I ever made.
I remember Lori so well. She's amazing. And there you go. She was a good bookkeeper. I mean, she was a really good bookkeeper. So you start out right, good bookkeeper. Then you have to have an accountant. Now, remember, the bookkeeper is there for accuracy, and the accountant is there for analysis. Okay, so
say that again.
The bookkeeper's job is accuracy. The accountant's job is analysis. Okay, so the accountant's the one that you should be looking at ratios. You should be looking at, okay, what does this mean? What's my cash flow mean? What do these different reports mean? And make sure that and double check the bookkeeper, right? Plus analyzing it from a tax standpoint. Then you have your attorney. Your attorney needs to be working.
So the bookkeeper's job is accuracy, right, and the accountant's job is
analysis.
Okay, I'm the world's slowest typer. I'm sorry. But go on.
That's all right. So now you got those two working together. Now you need to add in an attorney. Now, and I'm talking about some kind of a general contract business attorney. Okay. For me in my business, I do a lot of, I'm constantly creating intellectual property. So my primary attorney is an intellectual property attorney, but I also have a real estate attorney, and I also have a contract attorney. I also have I actually have a tax attorney that I go to, for actually drafting documents from a tax standpoint. And so, there's multiple attorneys, but you've got to have one attorney that you can go to on any kind of matter and just say, please, help me understand, or can you get me a referral to an attorney that's a specialist in this area? But you've got to have an attorney, and the attorney and the accountant have to be in communication all the time. Okay, they've got to be in constant communication with each other, because otherwise the attorney says, well, that's the accountant's job, and the accountant says, well, that's the attorney's job, and nothing ever gets done.
So the attorney's job is?
The attorney's job is to put it on paper. That's their job.
So the bookkeeper's job is accuracy. The accountant's job is analysis. So the attorney's job, in one word that starts with A, is?
I have no idea what that word would be. I have to think about that one.
Well, I was thinking about that, because that'd be great, because bookkeeper's job is accuracy. Yeah. Accountant's job is analysis. The attorney's job is... should start with an A to be a really cool one-liner.
I have to think about that one.
Okay.
But really, they're the ones who put it down on paper. They write the words. They make sure that it stands up in the law, that it'll stand up in court, and that it makes sense from a legal standpoint. Okay, so they're looking at it from a very different perspective from the accountant. The accountant's looking at it from the analysis. It's really, you talk about that whole lease issue, and I'm going, okay, well, part of that's the attorney, but part of it also is, I'm guessing that same dentist did not have their accountant look at the lease either. And the problem is that the attorney will write a lease. They'll look at it and say, this works from a legal standpoint, but the accountant's the one doing the analysis. So they're going, do the numbers work here? What happens with that CAM charge? That's an accountant that should be reviewing that. That's not an attorney that should be reviewing that. That's the accountant. So that's why they have to work together. Okay. Words and numbers. Accountants are numbers, and attorneys are words. And so those two have to work together on pretty much any deal you ever do.
Well said. And I noticed that when my dad was in his businesses, that a lot of the people who had problems, their accountant wasn't even in the state, and they just didn't know their numbers. And again, the accountant's job is analysis. The bookkeeper's job is accuracy. That they didn't have their own bookkeeper. They didn't know their numbers. In fact, it was just sad that all four of my boys were born here in Ahwatukee, which was annexed by Phoenix, so it's really Phoenix, Arizona. But if you walk up to anybody in Ahwatukee and say, where do you live? They say Ahwatukee. And they say, do you live? In fact, if you even ask them, do you live in Phoenix? They say, no, I live in Ahwatukee. So that's the deal there. But my boys we would go to restaurants, and there's only been 3 restaurants that have stayed open since my dental office opened in '87. All the other ones burn and churn. They have about a 40-60% going out of business in the first few years. Crazy, but I would tell my boys, I say, boys, well, let's ask this person, the owner, when he comes by, let's ask him what his food cost is. Because when my dad was in Sonic, food cost was 31%, crew labor was 18%, blah, 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 blah. And well, he would ask him what their food cost is. And they'd, and the guy would leave. And Eric, I mean, he wasn't even 8 years old. And he'd say, wow, Dad, he doesn't know his numbers. I said, yeah, and he doesn't know his numbers to be gone. And then the ones that stayed, my boys still talk about it. They'll walk up there because one time I said, I noticed you quit doing the dining room or the tablecloth. You always had a tablecloth over each table, and you got rid of the table. She goes, well, you know what? Turns out that, it was $1 per table per order, and it's just out of control. And we tried several ways. If I could have got it down to 50 cents a table, I would have kept the tablecloths, but I'm not going to waste $1 on every single order for a damn tablecloth. And I just sit there and thought, oh my God, this woman knows her numbers. I mean, she's, and the other thing is, and I hate to say this because it sounds just horrible to say. It sounds so racist, but it always seems like it's the immigrants who know their numbers in their business and work the hardest. Like I've noticed, I was talking to my dry cleaner guy, and him and his wife are from Korea, and I said, there's no national, dry cleaning chains that go coast to coast. You got McDonald's goes, how come there's not a dry cleaner coast? He goes, because immigrants take those jobs, and we will work 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. 7 days a week until we die. How do you Americans compete with that? But I've noticed the IPOs on NASDAQ. I mean, almost every IPO is a foreign-born person. And I've noticed all the restaurants out here that know their costs and stay in business, they're always immigrants. Immigrants always know their numbers. Do you think that maybe growing up rich in America, even poor Americans think they're poor? I mean, they're not poor if you go to any other countries. But have you noticed that immigrants just work harder for lower cost and know their numbers?
There's a great sense of entitlement in America right now, rich or poor. There's a great there's this whole idea that I'm entitled to this, I'm entitled to this, I'm entitled to that. And I'm entitled to work less hours. I'm entitled to make money. I'm entitled to go to college. I mean, all of those things are entitlements. And it's across the income span. It has nothing to do with how much money you make. But for example, I have a client, 3 Russian brothers. And they immigrated here with their parents, and the 3 brothers, they start construction. They told me after a year, they go, how do you not get rich in America? It is so easy to get rich here, because when you compare our laws and our systems to Russian or Chinese or European systems, they're all so restrictive, and ours are not. And all it takes is a little elbow grease and watching your numbers and paying attention. And it's not that hard to make money. I mean, it's just not, we are still the land of opportunity. And if you can't make money here, you can't make money anywhere. And that's the problem, is that we do have this feeling that we're entitled to our standard of living. We're entitled to what we do. And so that's why I think that people that come from other countries, they just have a different, they have a different view of life. And they go, wow, it was so hard there. The regulations were hard, or the politics were hard, or whatever. And here, I can pretty much do whatever I want. So all I have to do is work hard, get my education, and there's no restrictions on me. And so I think that's why you see people from other countries have such a leg up, because yeah, they're willing to work. They're willing to work more. But on top of that, they don't feel like they're entitled to anything. They feel like it's okay that they have to work 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. That's not a bad thing. That they would have been doing that where they came from for 10% of what they're making now. So they're thrilled. They're going, I don't mind. This is what you have to do.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what set off the Arab uprising, is when they tried to take away that guy's own fruit card, and just the corruption, because He was competing against someone that was paying bribes. But I can't believe we already went over an hour. But I still gotta. Can I keep you for overtime for a few minutes?
Sure, absolutely. Whatever you need, Howard.
So you're right here in Chandler, and we got a dental school out there in Mesa, and we got a dental school in Glendale, and they're both private schools, and those kids are coming out $400,000 in student loans. So they first think, well, I got so much debt, I'm just going to get a job at a big corporate like Heartland or Aspen or MB2, and I'm just going to do that until my debt's paid off. And then other people are saying, well, the average practice for sale is about $750,000. Maybe you should just go borrow $750,000 because the banks will loan to dentists so they have a pulse because their bankruptcy rate is less than 1%. And those 1% all have the same thing in common. They had their license taken away, and their license taken away was always for liquor, drugs, and women, and which I don't know why they didn't call me first. So if you don't have your license taken away, you're not going to go bankrupt. But they say, well, I don't want to go borrow $750,000. I'm already $400,000 in debt. And then when you talk about setting up like a retirement, like an IRA fund, they're like, well, I'm not going to put $1,000 a month in an IRA when I have a $5,000 a month student loan payment. So can you just switch this whole conversation and pretend that you're talking to a 25-year-old girl from Mesa? She just walked out of school. She's $400,000 of debt. And by the way, Tom, dentists don't take orders well. I mean, there's two types of people. You either love to give orders or take orders. And when you put 3 dentists in a building and they all have to work for a boss, they get along like vinegar and water. And you can prove this because they change jobs every year. So usually if they've been out of school 5 years, they've had at least 5 jobs before they start their own. So how would you tackle the new graduate with $400,000 of debt right here in your own town?
I start by asking, so how are you going to pay that off? How are you going to pay that off if you've got a $400,000 debt? And what's their starting salary going to be, Howard?
Oh, they'll make I would say they make 25% of what they produce versus a minimum day rate of about $500. So they'll probably make $145,000 a year.
So they're making $150,000 a year. How are you ever going to pay off a $400,000 debt? Okay, now you take this and you go, well, wait a minute. What if we bought a practice? What if we bought a practice for $750,000? What kind of income would that throw off? That $750,000 loan. What kind of income would that throw off, Howard?
The average can keep their overhead at 65%. If they're just average, 1/3 of that would be net.
Okay, so you got $250,000. So you got $250,000. Okay, now it's all about the numbers. I mean, like you and your kids, I'm all about the numbers. And so I'm just going to say, look, here's what happens if you buy a practice. Here's the numbers. Here's the net. Here's and here's how fast you pay off that debt. Okay, and include the $750 plus the $400, and here's how much debt you're going to pay off. Here's how it works. Okay, how much are you going to have left over at the end of the day? On top of that, remember the interest expense is deductible still, at least, a good portion of it is. And really for dentists, it's going to be 100%, right? So your interest expense is deductible. So you're really only paying 60% anyway of that interest expense, right? The government's paying the other 40%. And plus, you've got all your business expenses, so you've got to look at your tax side of that too. And after you look at your tax side of it, because you got big tax on wages, right? You don't have big tax on your business earnings. I mean, you can get those down pretty low. So if that's the case, how much money do I have left over? So I would just sit down and say, would you be willing to just sit down and let's go through the numbers? And let the numbers speak. You don't have to convince anybody of anything. The numbers can tell the story. And if the story is, look, you're better off getting a job for a few years than get a job for a few years. If the story is better, you're better off building a practice. Then the next question is, okay, if I'm throwing off $250,000 a year now in my practice, all right, what's the potential of that? Can I grow that to 300, 400? Because guess what? Your salary increases from the job are not nearly going to be as much as your income increases from the business. So you got to build that into the projection as well. But I always take, Howard, I take everything back to the numbers. because numbers are they're unemotional. It's not me telling you what to do. It's here's the numbers, you make the decision.
But we were talking about Entitled, and I want to say this because I don't think many people want to pop the bubble on their customers' heads. I mean, I call my seminar Dentistry on Sense because I have no problem calling my homies on their shit. You know what I mean? And I've seen these kids come out of school, and I say, look, I know your dad. Go home and move in with your dad. Now you don't have any rent, mortgage, equipment, and he'll love it. And he's like, oh, I'm going to get married and have a grandkid. I said, he'll love the grandkid 10 times more than you. Go home. And so they don't buy the practice. They took a job, but they go out and buy a $400,000 home in Chandler. And I'm like, whoa, you didn't want to buy a dental office for $750, so you bought a house consumption for $450 and then got a wife who married a rich dentist. She believes it no matter what the numbers say. So she's not going to work. She's just going to sit home and have about a half dozen kids. My God, I mean, and then again, I see this only with Asians and Africans where they come to America, they come out of dental school, they get out of school, they buy a practice. They move into their practice. They live in their practice, even though it's illegal out here west. It's not illegal in New York and New Jersey. In fact, the founder of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, his dad, Ed Zuckerberg, is a dentist, and the dental office was on the first floor of the house, and Ed and his 4 kids, including Mark, lived on the second and the third floor. And they'll say, well, how are they going to know I'm living in my dental office? But the point is, they come out of UP, $400,000 in debt, buy a dental office, live in it. Their office phone is their iPhone. They don't even have a car. And 3 or 4 years later, has no debt and she's piling up cash. Right. That is not something that happens when you're born in Phoenix.
Well, that's the tough part of it, right? And because you've got to be willing to look creatively and say what's possible, not just what isn't, but what's possible. And, mixed use property, I mean, you say you can't live in your dental office, but you can have mixed use property here. So you can have residential, you can get zoned, even in Phoenix, Arizona. So you've got zoned commercial on the bottom and residential on the top. We have many mixed use properties. So that's everywhere you go, you can get mixed use property. Then not necessarily a home, okay, but it's someplace that you get mixed use property. And, there's just lots of opportunities there to, keep your, here's the thing. When you buy a house, you're buying a liability. You're not buying an asset. You're buying a liability, because a liability is really anything that takes money out of your pocket. An asset, something puts money in your pocket. So you buy a practice, you're buying something that's putting money into your pocket. You buy a house, you're buying something that's taking money out of your pocket. And it's really that simple. That's why I say you run the numbers and you go, do you want cash coming in or do you want cash going out? Which one do you want?
So they should just go to WealthAbility.com, not TomWheelwright.com. I like that.
WealthAbility.com, and we're good to go.
All right. And how do they contact you if they're listening to you?
They're right on the button. There is a schedule a call button. And schedule a call. Our people will be all over. There's no charge to that call. We'll look at your tax returns. We'll look at your situation. We'll go we'll make some recommendations. Here's maybe the direction you want to go. We'll see if there's and if you want to bring your CPA to us because you love your CPA, but they just don't understand this stuff, bring your CPA to us. If you want to come to us and you go, look, I don't like my CPA anyway, you come to us and we're just, we'll set you up. Basically, we'll take care of you.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much for coming on the show. You got a shout out for Kiyosaki. You've done a lot with him, and he's another neighbor. He lives in Paradise Valley, which is between Phoenix and Scottsdale. So shout out to Kiyosaki. Just to make a word about him.
Absolutely. So Rich Dad Poor Dad, the single most popular book ever written in financial education, sold like 40 million some copies. I mean, it's just an amazing, they still sell over 1 million copies a year of that book. And if the New York Times were realistic, they would have it as the number 1 bestseller all the time. Because it's probably the number 1 bestseller of any nonfiction book ever. And we continue to write new books. I wrote this book with him. So this is this book called Why the Rich Are Getting Richer. And if you have to look at the very bottom, and it has my name in really small print, but we did write this book together. That's Why the Rich Are Getting Richer. And then there's other Rich Dad Advisors, and we wrote this book about building a team called More Important Than Money. So there's that book. We're writing a new book right now about how to have your infinite returns, how to make your money work for you. Kind of, instead of getting a 5 or 10% return, get infinite returns. And there's KSI is great. It's a great team. It's a terrific privilege to be part of that team. And we got real estate guys in there. We've got attorneys in there. We an attorney in there. We've got a stock guy in there. We've got a social entrepreneur in there. We've got all sorts of, so there's all sorts of good stuff. So anytime you go to a Rich Dad Advisor series of books, Rich Dad, any of the Rich Dad books are going to be great. Yeah.
And is he still living in Paradise Valley?
Yeah, he still lives up there in Phoenix. Yep.
Yep. Well, tell him I said hi. And what I love the most about him is how I love the book. But as a dad of 4 sons, I love the fact that my 4 boys were glued to that. And my gosh, they took that so to heart. And they, at a very, very young age, they decided they weren't going to be an employee. They were going to be an employer. And it's so amazing when someone touches your kid's heart and spirit and all that stuff. But hey, Thomas, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's just an absolute honor to podcast you. And if you ever got any extra free time, get on that Dental Town, and I'll send you some. Yeah, sure. I'll send you some links because I think dentists are your market. They love golf. And real estate, and you're the king of real estate. I can vouch for that. I can vouch for that. I've known this man forever. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Howard. It's just absolutely a privilege every time.
All right, buddy. Have a great day.
You too.